Now, let's catch up with some of the day's other news now. And here, major restrictions on travel between the UK and India will come into effect from Friday after the government placed the country on the so-called travel red list. COVID cases in India are soaring following the emergence of a new variant there, which has also been detected here. The Health Secretary made the announcement this afternoon, shortly after the Prime Minister cancelled a trip to India that was due to start later this week.
After studying the data and on a precautionary basis, we've made the difficult but vital decision to add India to the red list. This means anyone who is not a UK or Irish resident or a British citizen cannot enter the UK if they have been in India in the previous 10 days. UK and Irish residents and British citizens who've been in India in the past 10 days before their arrival will need to complete hotel quarantine for 10 days from the time of arrival. These rules will come into force at 4 a.m. on Friday.
That was the Health Secretary a little earlier in the Commons. In a moment, we'll speak to Sky's Sadia Chowdhury, who's in Bolton. But first, let's go to our chief political correspondent, John Craig, who is in Westminster. And John, I guess with this surge in cases in India, this was inevitable, both the cancellation of the trip and India going on the red list.
It's not a huge surprise, and a lot of MPs have been saying actually this should have happened a little earlier, more quickly. Mr. Hancock was saying that they detected 103 cases of this Indian variant. He said the vast majority have links to international travel and have been picked up by our testing at the border. This was one of two major announcements by Mr. Hancock when he was making a common statement this afternoon. The second was the government's is ramping up plans, as he put it, for a booster shot to ensure the COVID-19 vaccines stay ahead of the virus. Now, he said that we've already procured enough vaccine doses to begin booster shots later this year, and they're going to be working with the current vaccine suppliers and new suppliers like the CureVac partnership to work out which vaccines will be effective as a booster shot. He talked about specifically designing vaccines for variants of concern such as the South African variant. Now, of course, the announcement about the Indian red list move came hours after the Prime Minister confirmed what many of us suspected, that his trip to India, big trade trip with all sorts of trade deals he wanted to do post-Brexit, due a week today, next week, that's off. This was the Prime Minister confirming that today.
Narendra Modi and I have basically come to the conclusion that, very sadly, I won't be able to go ahead with the trip. I do think it's only sensible to postpone, given what's happening in India, the shape of the pandemic there. We're going to be going back. The relationship between the UK and India is of huge importance, and I'll be talking to Narendra Modi Prime Minister Modi on Monday. We'll be trying to do as much as we can virtually.
Well, the cancelling of this India trip begs questions. What about some of the other big international events the Prime Minister's due to take part in later this year? There's the G7 summit down at a hotel down in Cornwall. Is that going to go ahead as planned, with all the international travel involved in that? And then, of course, the COP26 summit on the environment, climate change, due to happen in Glasgow later in the year. Now, the COP president, that's Alok Sharma, former cabinet minister, insisted in the Commons the other day it would go ahead in person with everybody coming into Glasgow for that. But there are some doubts about that as well. Whilst there are all these variants in places like South Africa and India, some of these big international diplomatic gatherings, there must be some doubts about some more of those too.
Yeah, everything moving quite fast. Thanks very much, John. Let's go to Bolton, Sadia Chowdhury. So what's the reaction there to India being added to the red list? I assume people thought that it was expected.
Yes, well, some people might have been taken by surprise because, of course, if they're planning to travel after Friday back into the UK from visiting India in the last 10 days, they wouldn't have known that India was going to be put onto this red list. But as John Craig mentioned there, cases have been soaring in India for some time, so it doesn't come as a total surprise to many people. What is concerning is not just the cases, but that particular variant, which is being called the Indian variant. The body that looks into different variants here in the UK says that there are 182 cases of this Indian variant here in the UK, of which 162 were detected in the last 5 weeks. And that's what's prompted the Health Secretary Matt Hancock to make this, what he called, as you heard, a difficult but vital decision. He said that they'd looked at the characteristics of this variant, so things like transmissibility and its resistance to treatment and vaccines. And from that data, they determined that this is a variant of concern, and that the vast majority of those cases here in the UK have come as a result of international travel and detected through border testing. And what that means is that if you're a British resident or a British citizen or a UK resident or Irish resident, you can still come into the country, but you'd have to do that 10-day mandatory quarantine at a hotel. And if you're not falling into one of those categories, then you can't come into the country at all. And all of those rules come into effect from Friday 4 a.m. And that takes the number of countries on the UK's red list to 40.
OK, Sadia, thank you very much indeed.